A well-known book on military strategy and tactics is Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Based on the concepts of cleverness, adaptability, efficiency, and leadership, it provides insights and guidance on how to win battles and prevent conflicts. Most people agree that the book is one of the most important books about politics and war in history. Military tactics, judgment, and leadership are key components of the art of war. We may resolve disputes, avoid a lot of pointless fights, prevail without resorting to violence, and accomplish our objectives with the fewest possible losses by following Sun Tzu's advice. Additionally, he warned us against the perils of conceit, ignorance, complacency, and greed. His observations and counsel are ageless and useful in any circumstance. The 13 chapters that make up the book's structure each concentrate on a distinct component of battle, such as surveillance, terrain, preparation, and fire. Here is a summary of every chapter. Chapter 1. Laying Plans. This chapter explains why war is a delicate subject and that we should consider our options carefully before entering one. The ruler, the weather, the terrain, the general, and the army are the 5 variables we should take into account. Additionally, we ought to confuse the opponent and conceal our actual goals. Chapter 2. Waging War. According to this chapter, war is exceedingly costly and is to be avoided at all costs. Instead of depending solely on our resources, we ought to make the most of the adversary. Prisoners should be treated humanely and utilized for our benefit. Chapter 3. Attack by Stratagem. This chapter informs us that forcing the opponent to submit without a struggle is the greatest method to win. Instead of focusing on their strong aspects, we should address their weak points. Additionally, we must be adaptable and adjust to new circumstances. Chapter 4. Tactical Dispositions. We learn from this chapter that it is important for us to constantly be ready for battle. We must not allow the opponent to ambush or surprise us. We must also use caution to avoid overcommitting or becoming stuck. Chapter 5. Energy. This chapter advises us to make careful and effective use of our force. We ought to build momentum and make the most of it. To disorient and demoralize the opposition, we need also to employ wittiness and surprise. Chapter 6. Weak Points and Strong. This chapter advises us to be aware of both our own and the enemy's strengths and vulnerabilities. We ought to go after the weak and avoid the strong. We should understand when to fight and when to hold back as well. Chapter 7. Maneuvering. This chapter advises us to maneuver our forces quickly and skillfully. We ought to keep clear of unnecessary hold-ups and obstacles. Along with communicating openly with our allies, we should also plan our activities together. Chapter 8. Variation in Tactics. This chapter teaches us to adapt our strategies and plans to the needs of the moment rather than relying solely on one. We must remain unpredictable and inventive to keep the opposition guessing about our tactics. Chapter 9. The Army on the March. As we march through enemy territory, we should use caution, according to this chapter. We ought to be cautious and stay clear of dangerous areas. We must also be alert for indications of aggressive activities and take appropriate action. Chapter 10. Terrain. This chapter advises us to be aware of the various terrain types and how they impact combat. We should stay well clear of adverse terrain and select the favorable one. To hinder the opponent, we need also to make use of the topography. Chapter 11. The 9 Situations. According to this chapter, there are 9 different kinds of wartime scenarios, each with unique potential and difficulties. Instead of acting hastily or carelessly, we should modify our plan of action for each circumstance. Chapter 12. The Attack by Fire. According to this chapter, there are specific circumstances in which using fire as a weapon in combat is permissible. Knowing when and how to employ fire, as well as the consequences it will have on the opponent and ourselves, is important. Chapter 13. The Use of Spies. According to this chapter, we should use spies to learn about the enemy's strategies, whereabouts, advantages, disadvantages, and other details. We ought to keep our secrets safe from spies on the other side. To sum up, Sun Tzu's The Art of War is a timeless manual for anybody hoping to succeed in any effort. To defeat our adversaries and challenges, Sun Tzu shows us how to employ strategy, tactics, intelligence, leadership, and discipline. He also cautions us against the dangers of rashness, ignorance, carelessness, and pride. We may become more adaptive, flexible, creative, and resilient in the face of uncertainty and change by putting our insights and guidance to use. The art of war encompasses not just winning battles, but also leading a cautious and quiet life.